Right now, let's take a closer look at the Turkish economy with Paolo Von Schirach. Paolo is the president of the Global Policy Institute, a public policy research institute. Welcome back to the show.
Nice to see you.
So, given what we have going on now in Turkey between the currency, between inflation, what should Turkey's top economic priorities be right now?
Well, obviously, it's stabilizing the currency, needless to say, but it's not quite clear what the game plan of Mr. Erdogan and his advisors may be. We know that he doesn't like the idea of raising interest rates, and that would be probably the most prudent thing to do immediately in order to shore up the currency and deflect the run on the currency and inflationary pressures. It's not clear that he intends to do that because he wants to keep the economy buoyant in a sense, and interest rates, of course, don't do that. But we know that there are structural issues which really go back quite a bit and precede this current spat with Washington between Mr. Trump, our president, and Mr. Erdogan that led to the precipitation of this crisis, and that is the very, very large debt that private sector companies in Turkey have contracted over a few years. This didn't happen just yesterday, right. And this is usually denominated in hard currencies. Now that their currency has lost value, it's very difficult to service these debts and pay back these loans, which is very complicated.
Now, it's still a little bit light on details as to what the economic plan is going to be, but we did see the Turkish Central Bank presented a plan saying that they were going to provide all the liquidity that the banks need. How much is that going to ease the crisis, though? I'm
not quite sure. I mean, look, this may help a bit. I'm not sure that this would do it, meaning, okay, that takes care of it, everybody will, the confidence will be raised, etc. And to my knowledge, the amount of reserves that Turkey has, how much liquidity can you put into the economy, and if you run out of dollars and euros and what have you, at some point you run out of ammunition.
Now, what about the Turkish people and the businesses there? How are they faring amid all this?
Well, as your reporting has indicated, if you're catering to tourists, perhaps well, because they're flocking in, attracted by very low prices, because again, the lira's disadvantage is everybody's advantage, and therefore tourists and people buying, as you indicated, in luxury stores or what have you, are doing very well, and those businesses probably are benefiting, but the average citizen probably not so much, because prices are going up. Let's keep in mind also that Turkey is a net energy importer. Oil is denominated in US dollars. And on account of what just happened in the last few days, all of a sudden, Turkey's energy bill has gone up 40%. I mean, not 40% from the beginning of the year. Right. Now, in the last few days, 18%, which is huge. And so for a fairly large industrial economy, a country of 80 million people, that adds up and therefore complicates the balance of payments issues that Turkey is dealing with.
Now, let's also look at the countries that are most exposed to the domino effect from what's happening in Turkey. We saw the Argentine peso and the South African rand really bearing the brunt of this. Which countries are most exposed risk-wise?
I think you just mentioned them. Argentina is doing rather badly, but Argentina kind of was a little bit proactive in all this. And just a few months ago, the Argentine representatives came here to Washington and got a fairly sizable line of credit from the International Monetary Fund as insurance because of their own problems. South Africa, again, it's a fairly, how can I say, fragile economy at this time. They are not doing well. Their growth is very limited, and they depend on foreign investments. So the worst case scenario here is a domino effect. In other words, we've seen these, this is not new. In other words, we've seen currency crisis affecting emerging countries, middle-income emerging countries before. And if one catches the cold, others suffer from contagion because there is fear among investors that their currencies, again, are still too overvalued, and they run away. And also now there is the incentive of higher interest rates for anything that is denominated in US dollars, right, because the Federal Reserve here is in the process of jacking up interest rates. And so between choosing risky emerging country currency and the solid US dollars, which is beginning to give returns to investments, something that it didn't do for many years after the big financial crisis of 2008, investors are, we can see this hemorrhaging of money from emerging economies into the US dollar. And this hurts everybody.
Now, Paolo, we know that, as we saw that Angela Merkel speaking out, really trying to encourage the US and Turkey to resolve their differences. And there are reports that this standoff was actually fueled by this misunderstanding about the release of a Turkish prisoner and a US prisoner. Apparently, one thought it was going to be a release, another thought it was actually going to be a transfer. So given that this is a misunderstanding, what's the likelihood then that this tariff situation could be reversed?
Well, hopefully soon, okay? I think that the United States, again, using sanctions and tariffs, it's a blunt instrument. It's not something that you want to, douse liberally like that. Let's say Turkey was in a particularly vulnerable situation, and Mr. Trump put a match on it, and now it's on fire. And I think you really have to watch out what you do, because Turkey is a NATO ally. Turkey is whatever our differences, I mean, our government's differences may be, and you just pointed out this issue of prisoners or whatever, that could be swapped, and I hope that happens. If that is really the problem at this time, I hope that is resolved. But there are other broader issues of disagreement between the two countries. That said, in my opinion, the United States should keep in mind, as Chancellor Merkel pointed out from a European perspective, that Turkey is a very, very important country in the Middle East.
Right.
America has absolutely no interest in seeing Turkey destabilized and the economy sort of spiraling down and say, ha, 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 look what we've done to you. That's not smart. That's not intelligent.
Right.
And we don't benefit from it. And if this is all an issue of putting pressure on the Turkish government, I hope that the Trump administration can find other means and again, help Turkey stabilize its economy.
Well, thank you for your insights. We'll have to leave it there. Paolo Von Schirach, President of the Global Policy Institute.